Good evening, everyone. My name is Misha Glenny. I am the rector of the IWM, the IWM, das Institut für die Wissenschaften vom Menschen, here in Vienna, and it is my great pleasure to introduce tonight's Wiener Vorlesung. The Wiener Vorlesungen, of course, are the city of Vienna's fantastic contribution to debate and discussion in this city. But this is a special event because Wiener Vorlesung is doing it in conjunction with my institute, the IWM, as the second keynote speech in this year's Vienna Humanities Festival. This is the 8th year that the IWM and its collaborators have run the Vienna Humanities Festival. It takes place at the weekend on Schillerplatz at the Akademie der Bildenden Künste, the Academy of Fine Arts. And we are bringing together 21 panelists and speakers from all over the world, academics, journalists, artists, and it's a really strong program this year. So if you're not doing anything at the weekend, I can strongly recommend it. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank our collaborators and sponsors, above all the city of Vienna, who give us resolute support both for the festival and in general throughout the year, the Open Society Foundation, the Erste Stiftung, the Academy of Fine Arts and its rector, Johann Hartler, and last but by no means least, Desi Gavrilova, who I'll also talk about a little more in a minute, from Time to Talk, who was one of the co-founders of the Vienna Humanities Festival. But before we move to tonight's talk, I would like to invite to the stage, it's my great pleasure to introduce Veronika Kauphasler, who is the Stadträtin für Kultur. We would translate that into English as Minister for Culture for the city of Vienna. Veronika.
Good evening, everybody. A warm welcome to all of you and to all the organizers. A big thank you for preparing such a great festival, and also Anita Eichinger from the Wien Bibliothek for collaborating so well for education. And I think this is at the core of the city. And tonight, I'm truly happy to be here tonight because we talk about, or we listen to a profound speech about Eros. And as we all know, Eros and Thanatos, they are close together. And we talk a lot these times about death and about hatred, about the challenges we face. And it is also equally important to talk about not only love as something we need, agape, we need the sharing, we need caring, but also maybe more risky, the eros with all the components of death and threat. And you find it, of course, in Dido and Aeneas, in Purcell and the Greek mythology. Eros is always accompanied with an arrow, so it hurts. Basically, it hurts, but I would not have missed it in my life, and so I hope that you don't either. And I'm just curious, thank you for coming, benvenuto qui a Vienna, piacere di ascoltare.
Thank you, Veronika. And now it is my pleasure to introduce tonight's speaker, Federica Gregorato, who comes from Switzerland. She is a philosopher, an author, professor of practical philosophy. So we'll get some useful lessons that we can take home with us at the University of Lucerne. And she researches into social philosophy, feminist philosophy, critical theory, the philosophy of love, pragmatism and psychoanalysis. So quite a lot to chew on there. This year, her latest book was published, Love Troubles, A Philosophy of Eros. After Federica has given her talk, she will be joined on stage by the aforementioned Desi Gavrilova, and Desi will be in conversation with her for about 20-25 minutes or whatever time remains for us. But now it's my pleasure to invite on stage to tell us about Love Troubles, How Love Drives Transformation, Federica Gregorata.
So good evening. Thank you very much for this great opportunity. Thank you very much to the city of Vienna, to Stadt Wien, to the Humanities Festival organizers, which are the EVM. Thank you very much, Misha Glenny, for the great introduction. Also, thanks already to Desa Gavrilova. We will talk later on, but already a big thank from my side from this great opportunity to speak about something or to tell you about something that is very dear to me and important to me, but I think it is also to many others, to many of us. What is this? What is that? Western philosophy has always loved questions of the sort. What is the true nature of a thing, for example, of love? We philosophers usually try to pin down an essence that must remain the same, to capture a ghost, a shadow, hoping it will return always in the same shape. These attempts get us into troubles. When it comes to the troubles of our intimate, emotional, sexual lives, we get lost in the entanglements of our bodies and minds, eyes, shadows, and desires. We let ourselves be overwhelmed by a dizzying flood of numerous impressions and images. Our minds and bodies spin when we try to make up our minds and bodies about the truth or truths of love. Love is a vertigo, the experience of losing the mind, but also that body that is at the very center of our experiences. Losing the mind-body that many philosophers use to put in a center though that cannot hold. How can I tell you, how can I talk though about love as a philosopher? How to outline some philosophical considerations on love if philosophy, a practice of knowledge in search for stable, clear, universal answers, is undermined by the experience of love itself. When it comes to emotional, intimate sexual experiences, the knowledge that we need is a practical one. A know-how, an exercise. Is that possible? Can philosophy become a practice of learning how to stay in the vertigo? I believe or hope it can. And this is also the knowledge, the exercise that love itself entails. A couple of years ago, I got my first episode of positional vertigo, or with a more romantic term, labyrinthitis. I wake up one morning, and as I turn around in my bed from one side to the other, I begin to fall like from a 20-story buildings or off a cliff, like the Hitchcock's film, Vertigo. The first time you get an episode of this sort, you have no idea what's happening. It is scary. The following times, even if you know, and you know it's not dangerous and it can be actually pretty common, it feels equally terrifying. What you need to know is that the inner part of the ear that has the task to register impressions and images from the outside and transmit them to the brain, and the brain itself are disconnected. Vertigo is a violent break between yourself and the world out there, the world of other people, of nature, maybe even, or I would like to suggest, of social and political institutions. You lose orientation, you get lost in the labyrinth between yourself and the world. You don't know who you are and where you are now, and what will happen to you in the future. My first episode of vertigo prevented me for weeks to go and visit my secret lover. This person and I were secretly in love. We had been for a while, as we had not had a conversation about love, about our love yet. I was very lost in the lack of words. One of Roland Barthes' famous fragments in his famous Lover's Discourse recites, "The lover's fatal identity is precisely this: I am the one who waits." Waiting for a discourse or a conversation on love, for answers and words that usually never come, opens up a space that philosophy might want to wait on. I was waiting to tell him of my love because I was scared, and he was too, because a conversation of the sort requires decisions and changes. Philosophers ask what is love as part of their training. But this is a question that nearly, I think, all of us have asked ourselves at least once in our lives, most commonly when we are or we're young, or in moments of crisis. Since I have written a book and articles on the topic, this is very often, maybe too often, the first question that people throw at me. During interviews and public events, of course, but also in many private occasions, for example, at parties. I've always been embarrassed to answer, but also to not answer. I understand people's need to define, grasp, circumscribe the truth, or at least one truth about love. I have this need as well. My work on love and in love, though, has taught me that what we might want to resist is the urge to find the one answer. Love is rather a question, a series of questions, or maybe even better, a powerful force that brings us to ask questions. And this is the main definition, the main idea of love I want to work with or to play with tonight, and to see if this questioning is also linked to social and political transformation. So I said we might want to resist the urge to find the one answer about what love is, but we might also need to resist the urge to look for the one love, the one great love that defines our life. Too many women, in particular, have been ruined by such a pseudo-romantic pursuit. According to a still powerful ideology, the one love that we need to find is another person, the one and only person we have to desire sexually, whom we have to want to cohabit with, to marry, and possibly having children with and grow old with. A complicated technical term from this ideology is amatomononormativity. So I repeat it, amatomononormativity. It may sound like a term for a disease, because it is. Amatomononormativity refers to the set of social norms that compel us to believe that without the one, our life won't be fully accomplished. It is often used as an excuse to forgive and ignore abuses and even violence. It continues to lead a lot of people, especially heterosexual women, but not only, to forgo other very important needs and desires. Also, it makes us forget that there exists many love. Not only in the sense that we can dearly, even erotically love more than one person at the same time, or that family love is also crucial and precious, but also in the sense that we can have and should cultivate, according to amatomononormativity, we should cultivate, amatonormativity is problematic because it makes us forget that we should also cultivate the love for our friends, for natural and artistic beauties, and for our political communities and projects. So I would like to suggest that we should stop trying to understand what love is and embrace the experience of love as something that pushes us to ask questions and to question many other things. Such practice of knowledge has historically been one of the driving forces behind philosophy, in fact, or at least behind certain philosophies. In Plato's Symposium, the philosopher is the lover who wanders along this path, seeking something they will never find. For Plato, the path of the lover-philosopher lead us to dinner parties, to public squares, and to other higher magical metaphysical places. And I have myself only been to parties or public squares, not to higher places. At Plato's parties, gatherings, but also through their journeys, people make love, get high, experience ecstasy, especially thanks to the intoxicating power of their words and conversations. For Plato, doing philosophy and making love are similar experiences. In both, we learn something crucial about ourselves and about the world out there. We learn, especially, how to stay with the trouble in the vertigo. When I'm hearing you asking me if I love you and asking you if you love me, when I'm telling you of my love for you and of my love for other things and other persons, when I'm listening to you telling me all about your love and loves, we are not having a conversation just about one thing, be it an emotion, a desire, a state of mind, a social convention. When we are talking, when we are conversing, when we are exchanging words about our love, we are doing something else. We are opening up and decide to express other complex troubles and queries. What's happening? What is going to happen to us when we, for example, undress or touch? How can we care, not only for each other, but also for other beings so similar and so dissimilar to us? When and to which extent do we have to do that? What are our limits and boundaries in these endeavors? Do we feel at home or very far from home? And which one do we actually prefer? These are difficult questions which do not trouble us only personally and individually. These are queries about who we are as human beings, how do we want to live together, which kinds of institutions and social, political, economic arrangements best suit us, how our world can be jointly and hopefully joyfully inhabited. The questions I go through with my lovers and beloved about the rules, habits, patterns, and projects that constitute and move our shared life lead us, or may lead us, to broader questions about what kind of society and political order do we want to live in, or even wish to contribute to create, recreate, and change. Let me now quote one famous guy from Vienna. Quote, "A man who doubts his own love may, or rather must, doubt every lesser thing." This is a puzzling statement that Sigmund Freud puts at the end of his case study that goes under the name of the Rat Man. The Rat Man is a young man, probably a lawyer, trapped by ambivalent feelings. His sickness manifests in a series of intrusive, obsessive thoughts that torment him and keep blocking his actions. Some of them are bizarre and almost comical, in this context at least, for example, an odd fixation with weight loss. Other pretty frightening, in particular the fantasy of a bucket glued to his rear and with a rat inside. Sorry for that, it's not me, it's Freud. According to Freud, we suffer because we wrestle with inner conflicts without being aware of them. The Rat Man, I had to tell that story because it gives the name to this poor guy. The Rat Man loves and at the same time hates a woman, At the same time, he hates and loves his father. He's also convinced that his father would have hated his lady friend, but also, of course, in a way, desired. The rat man is not conscious of any of these feelings, which are nevertheless expressed beyond his will and awareness in weird, disgusting thoughts. According to Freud, sometimes we let our inner battles emerge through these thoughts, and sometimes these thoughts surface also on our bodies through physical symptoms: headaches, coughs, back pain, paralysis, stomach aches, vertigo. If we want to feel better, we would need to bring the contradictions and ambivalences that torment us to light. And this is not a rational, intellectual, philosophical process alone, not only. The physical bodily symptoms that are to be traced back to inner conflicts, conflicts about our desires, must be converted into words that make sense and can reveal to us what it is that we really want. And the confusing words that express obsessive, weird thoughts must be interpreted, rearranged, repositioned, as we do, for example, when we try to make sense of a poem or a literary text. The goal of such poetic interpretation, reinterpretation, is not to get at a theory about ourselves, to put ourselves in one of those little boxes made available by the categories of contemporary psychological and clinical languages that we all know, I think. The social media are overflown by these categories. Once we have established that we are, for example, we have ADHD, depression, borderline personality disorders, or that we have faced the one trauma or the other, or that we are avoidantly or anxiously attached, or whatever, we have not learned much. It is not simply about manipulating and changing our thoughts, or, as they say, cognitive patterns. The difficult work consists rather in opening and lighting up our ideas and mental contents in order to get at the passions and desires hidden in and by them. Through passions and desire, we can achieve a proper change. And this is a psychoanalytical work, of course. This is, I think, a philosophical work. And this is the work of the labor of love. In order to navigate relationships, we need to properly come to terms with what we do want and not want, to hear, to smell, to touch, and to do. The difficulty of getting a true grasp on our desires is that our desires might very well scare us, sometimes even appall us. We need to accept that many times the most exciting promises of love, intimacy, friendship, and family are threatened and even tainted by fears, imperfections, negative feelings, or death. The chiaroscuro, where love and hate, or anger or frustration, becomes each other's shadow, is not a second best, is not the most realistic option, what we have to compromise with when we enter adulthood or when we grow up. Love's ambivalences, its doubts, its troubles, must be looked straight in the eyes, assumed and explored. These troubles are the fuel of those intimate shared adventures through which lovers, friends, even parents with children, come to discover themselves in the eyes of the other, and the other in their own eyes. And these are, moreover, and equally importantly, adventurous discoveries of the world. The habitual world which becomes transfigured under new lights and new worlds that await to be made. When we ask and talk about love and hate, we do not just want to understand, to grasp the truth of something. For example, what I and you are truly feeling, or what has really happened to you, to me, between us, and so on. We are also, and maybe most of all, trying to decide something, to make a choice. Love is a verb, as the feminist philosopher Bell Hooks famously argued. It is something that we do. And what we do as moved by love does always introduce a change in ourselves, in others, and maybe sometimes also out there. Love as a verb, as an activity, makes us into proper subjects. A subject is, yes, someone subjected, maybe even submitted or submissive to others. When we love, when we are in love, we are actually always dependent on others, a bit overwhelmed, or more than a bit, by the power of others and of forces, sexual or emotional ones, that we perceive as beyond our control. Yet, as subjects, we act. Only subjects and not objects can properly act. Being a subject of love, being able to actively love other human beings or other things, is somewhat a more powerful experience than love as a passive condition. When we just receive love and are lightened up by others' emotions, attentions, when we love, we acquire and develop reasons and drives to realize something that does not just have to do with ourselves, to create, so reasons and drives to create or just participate in some beauty, to help and sustain others, and not just our closest ones, to engage in projects that try to make our world into a better place, more just and free. The tricky thing is that we also want to be seen, admired, supported, cared for. We all want and need to be loved. We want to be objects of love. So those who are not loved, or those who have not been loved enough by parents, partners, family members, community members, suffer in profound and inexplicable manner, sometimes even without words. This pain and profound lack makes it difficult to become an active subject, capable of loving others and doing things as moved by love. It is difficult, if not impossible, to develop self-love if others have failed to help us feel and understand that we deserve love no matter what. We become subjects, namely agents, also political agents, when we have been treated by others, the ones we are dependent upon, as subjects and not as objects. Regarding and treating another as a subject means to respect them as a free being, but also to help them to become free and to live freely, to realize freedom. This is a difficulty, this is a scary challenge, actually for every one of us. Even when we do love, we might do it in damaging ways, namely that do not enable or enhance our freedom, the other's freedom, in ways that held us and the other captive. To recognize and live with the freedom of the other, of the beloved one, is a challenge. In our societies, there are so many people who are not loved or not loved enough, which is the same thing. Non-white persons, queer, trans, or gender fluid persons, persons who grow up in an environment dominated by economic hardship and injustices, or disrupted by violence, persons with bodies and minds that do not conform to given standards of ability and rationality. And then there are people, for example, women, especially white women, who do comply with certain beauty standards, who are, yes, wanted, admired, idolized, maybe even cared for in some manner, but still held captive by the demands, fears, controlling mechanisms of others, by a heterosexist social and political order, the patriarchy, that cannot tolerate their freedom. Freedom means different things: being able to say no without punishment, to contribute to set rules, to make mistakes without being crushed by shame and guilt, free to be furious, free to be angry, free to go on adventures alone or together with the ones whom we have chosen. These kinds of freedom can realize only in relationships with others. Freedom is never an individual undertaking. So love is something that we do, and it demands choice. How shall we decide what has to be done, though. Saying yes or no to a kiss, to a ticket to travel somewhere, to the lease for a new apartment, to parenthood. But also saying no to all these things and other things. Saying no is always also a practice of love. How shall we leave behind doubt and make a choice? Sometimes, not only in love, but very often when love or the possibility of love is involved, making a choice scares us deeply. Our rational faculties tremble. Our rational legs tremble. Our bodies and minds spin. We sense that the consequences of the decision might change us forever and in irremediable fashion. According to the contemporary philosopher Laurie Paul, an exemplary case is the decision to become a parent. If I were now to decide whether to become a mother or not, I could only base my decision on whom I am right now, on what I currently know and desire and value. My present self is the subject who decides, but the self I will become after the decision might believe, appreciate, desire other things. Now I'm not a mother, but when I will become a mother, what will I find good for me? I cannot know. According to 19th century author Søren Kierkegaard, the philosopher who has actually thought about this issue a lot, and maybe even for the first time, we don't know, and we can only dare to jump into the unknown. We need to have some kind of faith. Kierkegaard believed in a very personal version, actually, of the Christian God, so he had faith in the Christian God, whom he interpreted a bit weirdly. But if we are not blessed with this kind of faith, all we can do is to have faith in ourselves, which doesn't seem a very good bargain or replacement. We have to know ourselves enough to believe that we are someone who is willing to jump. I don't know what I will become. I know that the curiosity for the unknown is something that will lead me into the future. I have to know that the desire to know the unknown, the desire to discover what awaits us, even if we might in the end not like it, which is often also the case, is and will be the most precious thing for us. But I do believe, so I'm not entirely sure this is a good basis for the choice to become a parent, and in fact, I'm not a mother, and I'm not thinking about that. But I do believe this is something, so this Kierkegaardian idea of knowing about the curiosity for the unknown, I believe this is something that we have to dwell upon when it comes to explore a new relationship or to leave one behind. Actually, Kierkegaard, so it's funny, also not funny, that Kierkegaard's own major transformative experience was his decision to leave, to give up on his youthful love for a young woman, for Regina Olsen, and to dedicate himself entirely to philosophy and writing, which is, of course, also a form of erotic love. Sigmund Freud, from his part, believed that what can sustain us through our decisions is a kind of faith in the reason hidden in that unreasonable, messy, uncontrollable dimension of the human spirit that he called, as we know, the unconscious. To decide, for example, whether to become a parent or to begin or end a love story, we must grasp the trajectory that our desires trace. The rainbow that connects our present to a future self. For Freud, an archaeological exploration of memory, dreams, fantasies, where the vastness of the unconscious takes place, and an interpretation of its fragmentary poetry can help us to trace the rainbow. also philosophical work, I think, the work that traces and examines and stays with contradictions and ambivalences might be helpful with the rainbow. In this moment in time, we are more and more tempted to delegate to artificial intelligences many activities that have troubled but also enrich humans, including solving our medical and psychological issues, putting arguments together, so reasoning, writing, feeling less lonely, connecting to others. I can, and maybe I should, ask ChatGPT to do many things for me, as I have relied also on therapists and read and listened to philosophers. But I want to insist today that the work on love, of love, in love that I'm sketching out here is a highly individualized and individualizing effort, and only as such can become social and political. This means that in the end, it's me and not some virtual or real assistant, not a theory. It's just me that must face my confusions, find the courage to do something about and with them. To choose and thus to serve on the rainbow between a present and a future self. And again, I'm not just talking about an individual or a personal self. It's also we, groups of people, societies, that we must decide what is going to happen to us socially, politically, what we desire to do with ourselves, who we want to be. So I want to come back to my Viennese guy for, again. I quote him again. A man who doubts his own love may or rather must doubt every lesser thing. So Freud. Why the rat man's indecision, do I love her or not, what should I do with her, might end up doubting other things too. Lesser things, or maybe even bigger things. How could a doubt about our feelings or desires spread into doubts about everything else, or many other things? The question, the doubting, Freud warns us, cannot become an empty loop. Stagnating repetitions, the same questions and answers and doubts all over again, are moving us away from our desires. Uncertainty cannot become our only certainty, our way of going through life. And luckily, this is not where the rat man lands. Freud's story comforts us with a happy end, indeed. The rat man improves his relationship with the memory of the father, who was already deceased, and decides in the end to marry, or at least to be with the woman he loves despite all. Today, like in Freud's day, like for Freud, uncertainty isn't popular, and for good reasons. Uncertainty in our romantic pursuit often undermines self-esteem, distorts our self-image, and makes us feel insecure, for instance, about our intellectual or professional abilities as well. We do a lot of so-called emotional labor in trying to decipher our romantic partner's doubts and insecurities. As many feminist thinkers have lately argued, women, especially heterosexual women, have become very skillful emotional laborers of the sort. But it's not necessarily good to have this specialization on this kind of labor, as women would maybe prefer and deserve to do other things. And Freud, regrettably, in fact, does not think about the poor lady friend of the rat man who had to endure his endless obsessions and uncertainties. Certain experiences of love can make us doubt ourselves and lose our bearings. The constant pressures of the complaints, jealousies, manipulations, lies of our partners can blow apart our anchors, undermining our sense of a coherent self. It's the so-called phenomenon of gaslighting, for example. We know this by observing the effect on women of their alliances or long-term partnerships with men. Men who are not able to address and revise the patterns and habits that patriarchy has deeply planted in them are destroying women's lives, driving them to exhaustion, depression, and madness. We know that many younger and older heterosexual women today are coming to realize that separation, divorce, and being single are better options than insisting in putting up, forgiving, trying to educate men who are still profiting from the privileges of patriarchy and are too weak and scared to change. We also know that patriarchy is very powerful, as it is a ramified system with a lot of disincentives for women who want to leave, be alone, and rebel. Women, trans men, queer women, and queer men, and all of us who have deviant, non-conventional, rebellious desires are harshly punished. They are ridiculed and belittled, guilt-tripped, silenced, made invisible, beaten up, raped. And to be clear, I'm not saying that gender and sexual violence is only a response to attempts to rebel. Many horrible things do also happen to women, especially also who try to perfectly comply with norms and expectations of their gender. In German, doubt is Zweifel. In the process of Zweifel, we become zwei, two. Doubting and questioning is a movement that opens me up in two, it splits me. And in the split, contradictions and ambivalences unravel. Like many women of my generation and of previous generations, I've learned to feel constantly and constitutively wrong. Too dependent, but also too independent. Too needy, but also unable to express my needs. Too demanding, yet morally inconsistent. Anxious, yet very well able to make others, especially men, anxious as well. Inconsolable, yet able to self-soothe too quickly. Insatiable, yet too easily satisfied, and in the wrong ways. Part drama queen and part icy princess. The wrongness, apparently, consists in me wanting different, contradicting things. A word closely related to Zweifel is Verzweiflung, despair. The despair of not being able to hold together these two parts, the two terms of the contradictions, the two versions of myself, the one who loves too much and the one who loves too little or in the wrong ways, the one always in love and the one always seriously questioning the possibility of love, the one who is all in and the one who wants to get out and quickly. As I've just suggested today in this talk, however, not all doubting is bad. And maybe sometimes also not all despair is bad either. The splitting, the doubling, the becoming two can also be of another sort, or we can interpret it from a different angle. In the act of doubting, like for Descartes in the act of thinking, there is on the one hand the one who doubts, and on the other, that which is doubted, is questioned, is criticized. There is the subject who feels despair, and the things that make them desperate. The objects of doubt and the objects causing despair need to be brought into focus. In doubting, in owing the negative emotions, I begin to sense myself as a strong subject, I might begin to sense myself as a strong subject who is able to distancing themselves from even rebelling against something that is not, that doesn't have to be liked and accepted. Maybe most importantly, through the process of doubt and despair, I can begin to question a set of rules and norms, a system of practices and values. For example, the system that has been called, I have called, and I want to continue to call the patriarchy. Patriarchy is a system that makes women feel constitutively, constantly wrong and guilty. Regardless of what we do and how we feel, we are disappointments. The contradictions in which we wriggle are imposed upon us. Always too much and never enough, as the motto, which is also a furious cry for help, goes. This is a system that convinces us that a certain kind of romantic love is the highest goal. In fact, Amato mononormativity is an important part, is integral to patriarchy. In the system, however, the pursuit of this kind of happiness that Amato normativity promises brings us to squander, all of us, men and women alike and other genders as well, to squander energies, jeopardizing other goals that would make our lives richer and more meaningful. We are taught that being dependent and submissive is appealing and sexy, but also humiliating and shameful. We learn how to care and please those who are dependent on us, partners, men, children, the elderly, while the power and the independence that come with such know-how are suffocated and ostracized. But I want to insist today on the fact that the derailing experience of self-questioning and suffering can become an initial and precious moment of critique and transformation. By questioning certainties that do not feel certain anymore, either about ourselves and the world, we must start to expand our subjectivity along novel waves of desires, our desires. All that is solid melts into air, as Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels wrote in the Communist Manifesto. All that is solid melts into air. This is a metaphor of revolution, one of trembling and fear, but also hope, the hope that a better society could come into being. So love troubles us in many ways. Too many, I'm tempted to say, especially under conditions of patriarchy, transphobia, racism, and capitalism. Yet each person in the system is a unique poem who deserves a unique interpretation. Like many poems, each person contains conflicting wishes, unsettling ambivalences. The shifting and ever-changing space of sexual love, but also of friendship, of parental or family love, is traversed and animated by these unsettling and ambivalent forces. To make love is to unmake, to undone something, oneself, another, one's own life, but also the larger social, political, economic conditions that shape our lives. To make love is to doubt, and to doubt is what makes us think, write, live, and finding new and better ways to understand and attend to the needs, desires, projects of ourselves and others, those we know and love, and those we don't know and love yet. So at the beginning of the talk, and now I'm concluding, I told you I've been struggling and still struggle with definitions of love. I have suggested that when we ask what is love, what we are really doing is something else. We are trying to protect ourselves from a self-destructive chaos, to find points of orientation, to re-establish, but also to reinvent a connection between ourselves and the world. And this chaos, as I have suggested, is not just the normal chaos of the other one not wanting us or not being reciprocal in their love, but it's also the chaos, the contradictions that cannot be held together of patriarchy and of other systems of oppressions as well. To undone what is making us miserable and unfree, to remake a portion of the world where we and more people can be feeling seen, supported, joyful. The troubles of love are powerful. They make us very little, but they can also make us bigger. They can disempower us, but also give us the power to thrive alone and especially together. And in the end, it all comes to a choice, what we want, what we do not want. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Federica, for this really engaging talk on a topic that probably every second person, at least in this hall, will feel to be an expert on and capable of writing at least a book about. But actually, you did write a book about love, and it's a very insightful book in which you apply the critical social philosophy method to understanding of love and invite us to see erotic love not just as this private event where, and it is an event because, as you say, love is a verb, an event which brings people together so that they start to see each other in a way that no one else sees them and be seen by the other in this unique way. And by this, they create this space of radical freedom. And what I find a key claim in your book is that from this unique space of loving relation and of radical freedom, this has a potential to transcend into society at large, to change the norms, challenge them, change them, and change society at large. So at the beginning, I would like to invite you to elaborate a little bit further. Of course, you mentioned this in your talk, but on this process of this transgression from the private, intimate space to the society at large, and also what is the philosophical tradition in which you place your thought on the subject?
Yes, thank you very much for this question. Well, I wrote this book in 10 years, so it was a very difficult process, and also a process of love and a lot of troubles. So, and thank you for the question. It allows me to open up some things I've just hinted at, actually, in my lecture. So the main idea, maybe, of the book is that the personal of love and the political of love are intertwined. So usually we are used to say the personal is political. So love is political in the sense that how we love, our habits of love are shaped by what society and the political order dictates. And this is absolutely true. At the same time, I wanted also to explore the relationship between the private and the political from the other side. And then my question was, how can the private of the privacy of love, the personal of love, influences the political, or even, do something to change some of it as well. So you have also asked me about freedom. The point is that, so why do we want to have the personal that is acting in a transformative way upon the political? Because we would like to be free, and we would like to experience this radical collective freedom. Maybe I can talk more about it later on. But we cannot, because actually in our societies, a lot of people women, heterosexual women, queer women, trans persons, queer persons, racialized groups of people, people who struggle with economic injustices. We are not free, right? And we are not free in the sense that we cannot have spaces for ourselves where to experiment with ourselves when we can understand what we want. So freedom for me is not the capacity or possibility to do whatever I want, but to, first of all, to understand what is the nature of my true desires, and we have to understand that with other people in spaces of radical freedom. And precisely the society, because of these systems of oppression, we are not free in this sense. But at the same time, we do experience the need, the desire for this kind of love and for this kind of freedom. And sadly, under conditions of patriarchy or capitalism or racism, this love can be maybe just a fantasy or an illusion. For example, women, heterosexual women who enter in love, romantic relationships, they have to do that. So they have to submit or to become very much dependent and to be submissive and to give up a lot of things, as I was saying, in order to stay in the love relationships. But the desire for a certain kind of love and the desire to transform the fantasy, which in reality is not love, but it's violence or submission or domination. But there is this desire to transform the fantasy into reality. Hence, you have to transform reality. You have to engage in projects to acquire, to achieve those spaces in which you can, where you can realize freedom. And this is something that you also ask about the philosophical tradition. This idea about freedom as a collective enterprise is so this is something that you find in the Hegelian social philosophical tradition. Hegel, Marx, and Simone de Beauvoir are my heroes in this respect. But also the idea that when you experience love, even though it's not perfect, let's say, but still you can experience a certain kind of joy, and that joy can, even though it's a fraught joy, even though it's part of an illusion, but that kind of joy brings you to see how the world can be changed in order to expand those possibilities of joys. This is something that I owe to Audre Lorde, who is more in the Platonic, actually, tradition.
Your understanding of erotic love encompasses both romantic love and friendship. I have to say I was surprised when I read about it, but then I was convinced by your argument. But can you tell us what are the qualities of friendship that make it legitimate to be included into the term of erotic love? Or is every friendship actually also creating these spaces of freedom that you describe as being created by romantic love, or are there specific qualities, specific types of friendship that are to be understood as erotic?
Well, intense friendships or passionate friendships, the friends you really cannot live with. The friendships that unmake you, that contribute to undone you, like certain romantic partners. There might be some differences between sexual lovers, sexual romantic lovers, and intense, passionate, impassioned friends. Maybe there is a kind of urgency that is a bit more intense when it comes to also sexual attraction. You can maybe wait a bit longer to see your non-sexual friends. But basically the most important things for my definition of love, which is just one kind of love, right? I'm talking about this very also exhausting kind of love, with a lot of work of critique and transformation and self-critique, and So those characteristics of erotic love, I have found them also in intense, important friendships. And I wanted also to talk about friendship in this sense, and to put friendship under the category of erotic love, because in our societies, and this is one of the problems of our societies, is that friendships are not valued as highly as romantic partnerships, and I think, and this is part of the Amato mononormativity regimes, and I think this is a problem also from political perspectives, because it reduces very much the depth and the possibilities of our communities.
In the book, you referred some point at Foucault's interview from 1981, Friendship as a Way of Life, in which he described friendship, especially among gay men, as not being only about romantic love or sexuality, but being a radical practice, a sort of creative force for reinventing the ways we live, relate to each other, and to resist. Nowadays, many different forms of loving constellations and care are being normalized in Western society. Not only gay love or gay marriage, many different, also polyamory, for example. Do they still have this power to transgress social norms? Or does the fact that they are already kind of accepted, recognized, it kills their radical potential?
Yes. I don't think the normalization has gone I don't think we can really talk about a normalization. I don't think that queer tribes, polyamorous experiments have become normalized, have become largely accepted. So maybe, well, yes, if you live in Berlin or maybe in Zurich or maybe in Vienna even, there are among educated people with from certain social classes, maybe there you get the impression that these forms of love are accepted, have become a new norm. But I don't think it's the case for many, many places. I come from Italy, and in Italy, the vast majority of people and also the persons I know, they don't even know the basics of what polyamory means. A lot of people continue, also educated people, continue to confuse between polyamory and polygamy. So it's this kind of education about love, I don't think it's really a part of reality as we might want or think. Also, right now, I think we are observing a return of Puritanism. We talk about neo-Puritanism. There is a return of conservatism, not only on a political scale, but also when it comes to private relationships. And here it's a very well example of how the political and the personal now are intertwined. There is also so traditional gender roles are coming back big time. You think, for example, of the horrible thread wife Instagram or TikTok trend. So yeah, maybe at some point we will have normalized queerness and polyamory, but I don't think.
But is this an ideal that is worth pursuing and working for? And how will a society look like where the Amato mononormativity, as you said, is not anymore normativity, it's not the norm, but the individuals actually are freely pursuing their shape of relationship, the ones that suit them. And then they have much more fluid constellations and much more temporary, so how will a society look like? Is this an ideal worth pursuing?
I hear in your question a fear of that I'm being too much libertarian or individualistic, where everyone is pursuing their own private individual goals. Well, I don't think so. On the contrary, amatonormativity is a very individualistic society which tends to exclude, which is based on exclusion, which again is a mirror of other kinds of exclusions from communities. Amatonormativity is a society, is a regime where the less, the better. I don't want to, so and the problem with amatonormativity is, of course, not that individual persons want to have monogamous relationships, or when individual persons do love just another person is great. The problem of the whole regime, or the whole system, is that people who do not want that or cannot be in a relationship with just one person are ridiculed and punished and ostracized in many ways. Also, it's interesting that the vast majority, again, of those defending the monogamous family or the monogamous model do betray the model all the time. So there are a lot of cheaters among there. So a lot of people who defend monogamy, they cheat on their partners. So it seems like it's a very maybe Catholic thing or Christian thing that you need the sin in order to reinforce the system. So, but also I do not want to. So the ideal is not a society where the norm is polyamory, because otherwise it would be another regime where those who are not polyamorous and they want to have monogamous relationship are again ridiculed and shamed. And so in the tradition, in the philosophical tradition I am from, which is again Hegel, Marx, but also Adorno, Theodor Adorno, it's very difficult from a philosophical perspective to say what the just society will look like. We can't just criticize what we have. We don't know, we cannot know from a theoretical or from an intellectual standpoint, we cannot know what it will become. But I don't think that these forms of non-conventional or alternative forms of relationship, I don't think they are based on, they're not, I don't think they're not individualistic or precisely because of what I said about freedom before. So freedom doesn't mean that I decide, I do whatever and the social order cannot ban me. The freedom I'm looking for is a freedom where we all together decide what's best for us, which is, we have already a name and a great theory about that, which is democracy.
In your book, in several places, you really beautifully describe this space of erotic love as a space without hierarchies, a space that destroys power relations because of the nature of love between two people. And I had to think, reading about that, of the Me Too movement, which postulates that any romantic relationship between people that are socially in relation of power is wrong and should be prohibited. But as you say, love is an event, it's something that happens. So shouldn't we look at some of these cases? Should we allow the possibility at all to think that it is possible that even in the existence of such a power relation, imagine a professor and a student, for example, that actually the event of love, if it happens, is actually destroying power structures. It creates a space that destroys power structures that can further transcend to the larger society somehow? Or should we always I mean, as the Me Too movement postulates, kind of name it, label it wrong, and prohibit it?
Yeah, thank you. So thank you very much. This question is terrible in the sense that it's very, very difficult and very painful because it gets at the heart of what I'm trying to say, which is ambivalent. It's ambivalent from an ethical point of view. I think that there can be love in this erotic, emphatic way I'm trying to articulate, even if there is a power relationship which is problematic, which doesn't make the power relationship less problematic though. So there are certain relationships which can have that transformative quality, and at the same time, they can do a lot of harms. And of course, from an ethical point of view, I would say, well, it's not a good idea to, and of course we have to say that, we have to be very attentive to the harms that can happen when sexual desire, when attraction, when this desire for transformation happens. But we cannot have a theory, and I'm not trying in any way to justify these harms, but we have to accept that these harms can happen. And it's better, I think, to have a theory that looks at, or a theoretical outlook that looks at that takes seriously the possibility of the harm, instead of want to have the perfect ideal of free love or equal love or reciprocal love. One thing, though, that I can say from this internal perspective is that when a power differential is involved, all the beautiful things that can happen, especially this transformative, this self-disclosure, the self-knowledge, the knowledge of the other, they are blocked. It's very difficult to turn a power relationship where the power differential is big and problematic into something, the problem into that kind of freedom. The problem, though, is when you are in the game, when you are inside a situation, it's very difficult also to separate the good part and the bad part. So these ambivalences are sometimes there's no way out. So it's very difficult to disentangle the free part, the transformative part, from the controlling and even violent one. And this is one of those, let's say, realities that...
In today's technologically advanced neoliberal global world, there is a sort of a loneliness epidemic. There are several studies that show throughout the globe a decline of sex, for example. So do you think that 21st century modernity means less erotic love necessarily?
Yes, this loneliness epidemic is, I'm looking into that. So I'm very interested in what it means, also because my new project is on depression. So it's from love to depression. Actually, because of that. So one of the reasons is these transformations. And what interests me is, why do we have this loneliness? And maybe one of the reasons, which is connected to what we were saying before, is that we have a lot of fear of the troubles and of the ambivalences of erotic love. And this fear is, again, ambivalent, because on the one hand, it's perfectly rational that, for example, women fear to enter new relationships or new encounters because of what they know that certain men can do to them, or men can do to them. So this fear, so it's better to stay alone, to not, it's better to be alone than to face these possible dangers. But at the same time, it's a pity. It's a pity that the ambivalence and the uncertainties and the dangers are not faced with more courage. But yet again, from where do we learn this courage if the world is, heading to maybe a third world war, and the climate change is destroying our possibilities of future? So it's very difficult to love and even to have the courage to face the trouble, the ambivalence, if there is a destruction of futures. Sorry for being it's very bleak, but.
Would you say that knowing our feelings or describing the landscape of our emotions is a necessary yet still a little bit undervalued part of understanding our societies better?
Yes. Short answer. Yes. Actually, part of this questioning and doubting and trying to change things come from this work that we have to do when we have to face both negative, ambivalent, and positive emotions. We have to ask, so all this doubting and questioning is in order to understand, okay, what's happening to us? What do I feel? I don't know what I'm feeling. I don't, why this anger? Why this frustration? Why this hate that I feel? What kind of violence had I gone through? What can help me to understand this kind of violence? And there I think critical theory or a certain kind of political philosophy helps to deal with your emotions or affects or passions. But at the same time, this inquiries, this philosophical or theoretical attempts, considerations, come from this urge that emotions, that these emotions urge us, like they push us, they interrogate us, and philosophy is this kind of response to this taking up the challenge that our emotions are offering us.
And my last question is about the purpose of philosophy.
Oh.
If philosophy means love for wisdom, it should help us to live better, make better choices in our lives, perhaps. So my question is, in the course of your intellectual inquiry on the topic of love, did you learn to love better? To endure better in love?
No. It's it's funny because this. A couple of persons that I love very much have read the text for this talk, and they have both of them have told me, well, it's a nice text. It's nicely and even beautifully written, but don't you think that love is actually another thing? Don't you think that love doesn't have to, so it's not this questioning and continue to question and this exercise of critique and transformation, maybe even, which is exhausting, and don't you think that love has to do with something else, which is maybe that peace that you find when, for a while at least, you stop questioning, you stop asking, you just, live and you are content and you enjoy the life that you have found, or the answers that you have found with another person or with more persons. And of course I was reading into this important comments, also a critique of my way of loving them. And then, though, I answered, well, but it's not me, it's a system. It's not my fault, in the sense that for certain people, for certain women, this questioning is a response to a certain kind of difficulty and impossibility. So I don't think that philosophy can really tell us what we have to do or what. So I don't think that philosophy has to do with wisdom. Only maybe the wisdom how to navigate these questions, these troubles. Philosophy has more to do with finding the right way to ask questions and to question certain things, to criticize certain things, to try to say something how we can change without knowing where are we going. So yeah, maybe sometimes there is a tension and a negativity, so a negative relationship between love and philosophy. And this tension or this ambivalence is also something that I wanted to talk a little bit today. On the one hand, I tried not to be a philosopher today while I was reading, and then at the same time, I still need philosophy because there are still so many troubles and unhappiness connected to this sphere of our life. So we continue to need philosophy if we are unhappily in love.
Federica Gugurato, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
And just to say that the next Wiener Vorlesung will be on the 6th of October on the topic of Klimawandel in Österreich. Have a good evening.